Everyone. I'm Jill Jansen, Dr. Jill Jansen, and owner of Jill's Spectrum Coaching. And I'm going to give people a minute or two to join. So while you're waiting, tell me where you're joining from today. Just drop in the chat like what city or state you're located in. I'd love to see where everybody's coming from today. So while you're introducing yourselves, I don't know what your day has looked like. Maybe you've been working, maybe you've been rushing from one thing to the next, and maybe your mind is already thinking about what you have to do later today. So let's just take a moment together. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out, and look around the room and notice 5 things you can see. Really notice them: the colors, the shapes, the details. And now notice 4 things that you can physically feel. Maybe it's your feet touching the floor. Maybe it's your back against the chair, your clothes against your skin. Notice 3 things you can hear, things you can smell, and 1 thing you're grateful for right now. So take another slow breath and ask yourself a simple question. Am I safe right now? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but right now. And if you're feeling a little more present, type a 1 in the chat. Okay. So, because much of what I'm going to talk about today starts with awareness, and awareness begins by slowing down long enough to notice what's happening inside of you. And so while people are joining, uh, just looking at everybody, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm have one expectation, and that's that I hope you're going to learn something today. And I hope I leave you with a little more awareness, but I also really hope we have some fun. And because emotional conversations do not have to be heavy all the time. So we're going to be talking about some meaningful topics today. And I hope that we're going to laugh, share some stories, and realize that we're a lot more alike than we think. So feel free to participate, ask questions, share your thoughts in the chat, and most importantly, please be kind to yourself. So I have a question, and this is for everyone. How many of you have ever felt like something was wrong with you? Maybe you felt different. Maybe you felt misunderstood. Maybe you felt that someone else got a handbook for life and somehow yours got lost in the mail. If that's you, type a 1 in the chat. Alrighty. And so, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Jill Jansen. I'm a coach. I have multiple psychology degrees, and I'm a late diagnosed ADHD adult, which means I have both autism and ADHD. And honestly, for most of my life, I felt like I was playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except me. At times, I felt so different that I used the joke that I was maybe an alien. I yeah, it just kind of helped me relieve that tension. So does anybody else feel that they were different? Maybe not the alien part, but just feeling different. The feeling that everyone else seemed to understand things that didn't naturally come to you. All right. And for a long time, that the problem was me. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I needed to fix myself. I thought if I worked hard enough, learned enough, and those that know me know that I took it quite to the point of obsession with learning, improved enough, or healed enough, that eventually I would become the version of me that felt okay. But before I tell you that story, I want to share one of the most healing moments in my life. This is not a story about autism or ADHD. This is about being human and being vulnerable. Last week in Sedona, I attended a healing retreat. And at this retreat, this woman in the audience stood up and bravely shared her story. From the outside, she looked like she had everything together, confident, successful, the kind of person you assume that has life figured out. And then she started talking about her fears, her struggles, her wounds, and her trauma. And I was just sitting there thinking, wait, you too? You mean it's not just me? You mean even people who look like they have it all together are still carrying things we can't see? Now, logically, I already knew that. I knew people struggled. I knew people had pain, and I knew people had fears. But knowing something and truly accepting it are two different things. And that moment, I just understood it. I also felt it. I embraced it. And for the first time, I truly accepted that I wasn't alone with my trauma and wounds. And also, one of the things I want you to come away with here from today is it was not my fault. And there was something incredibly healing about that realization. Not because her story fixed me, because it helped me stop believing I was somehow uniquely broken. It helped me realize that being human means we all carry things. We all have fears. And we all have wounds. We all have experiences that shape us. And it helped me realize something I want to share with everyone today. It is not your fault that you need healing. It is not your fault that life shaped you. And it's not your fault that you adapted to experiences that were difficult, overwhelming, or simply more than you knew how to handle at that time. That's what human beings do. We adapt and we find ways to survive, especially when life doesn't feel safe. It's natural that we look for ways to create safety. When we fear rejection, we look for acceptance. When we feel vulnerable, we protect ourselves. And when we feel powerless, we look for ways to control. For some people, those adaptations become achievement. And often, those adaptations involve expending more energy, such as becoming perfectionistic, people-pleasing, overthinking, overworking, masking, and there's many, many others for adaptation strategies. And at the time, those strategies made sense to me. They were my attempt to make me feel safe, accepted, worthy, or in control. And the problem isn't that we adapt. The problem is that many of us later begin judging ourselves for those adaptations. And that's where the shame entered the picture for me. Because it wasn't just that I had fears. I actually became ashamed that I had fears. And it wasn't that I struggled. I became ashamed that I struggled. And it wasn't just that I made choices that weren't aligned with my values. I became ashamed that I made them. And I abandoned myself. I tried to earn love, belonging, approval, or worth. And instead of understanding those that fear underneath those choices, I judged myself for that. I told myself I should have been better. I should have been stronger. And over that time, that shame became incredibly heavy. In some seasons of my life, it became so heavy that I didn't want to be here anymore. I developed suicidal thoughts, not because I wanted to die, but because I wanted the relief. I wanted the self-judgment to stop. I wanted the shame to stop. And I wanted this feeling that something was wrong with me to stop. What I didn't realize that was that the shame was keeping me stuck. Because shame says there's something wrong with me. Awareness is, now I understand. And that realization changed everything. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever thought, if I could be more confident, just stop overthinking, or find the right relationship, yeah, life would be awesome. And I just want to fix myself. Type a 1 in that chat if you've ever had any of those thoughts. I think a lot of us spend our lives trying to fix ourselves. I think a lot of us spend our lives with that thought, if I could just change and do this one thing, fix this one thing, this one improvement will make me feel okay. But the problem is you fix that one thing, then your brain finds another and another. So the real issue is often the fear underneath it. Think about perfectionism. Perfectionism isn't about being perfect. Underneath the fear is avoiding the criticism. People pleasing isn't about being nice. It's about a fear of being rejected and avoiding rejection. And overthinking isn't about being smart. It's trying to prevent pain. When I started asking those questions, everything changed because I stopped seeing flaws. I started seeing fear, and I stopped seeing weakness. I started seeing survival strategies. And maybe the most important lesson I've learned in this, most of us are not fighting with our behaviors. We're fighting with those behaviors that are protecting us from our fears and our shame. So think about that for a moment. What if the goal isn't to get rid of the behavior? What if the goal is to understand it? Because it's very hard to change something you don't understand. And it's even harder to change something you're shaming yourself for. Again, shame says something is wrong with me. Awareness says, now I understand. And awareness creates choice. And once you understand the fear, you have a choice. So you can keep letting that fear make your decision, or you can start making decisions based on your values. And that's where courage comes in. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing what matters more than the fear. It's setting a boundary, even though you're afraid someone might leave. It's speaking up, even though you're afraid of being judged. It's being more yourself, even though you're afraid of not fitting in. And it's choosing growth over comfort. So every time we do that, we take a little bit more of our power back. And that's self-leadership. That is freedom. And once I understood that, I noticed something else. I realized there were parts of myself I had been hiding for years. And that brings me to the next lesson, which is masking. And that's common for not just people on the spectrum for autism and ADHD, but I realized at the Sedona retreat, many people mask. And so once I started understanding my fears, I noticed something else. I noticed that there were parts of myself I'd been hiding for years. Not because I was trying to be fake, it was because I was trying to fit in. And that's what I observed at the Sedona retreat. We learn very early what gets approval, what gets acceptance, and what gets praise. And without even realizing it, we all adjust ourselves. We become who we think we need to be. I honestly did not even know I was masking. I just was thinking I was trying to be accepted, trying to be not judged, trying to not be rejected. But I did realize, once I realized I was masking, that I had spent so much energy trying to be accepted. And with all that energy I was exerting, I lost sight of who I really was. And I realized I became an expert at reading a room, expert at adjusting my behavior, and an absolute expert at performing and camouflaging so I could fit in. But I did not know myself. I was not an expert of myself, and I was denying myself self-care and self-acceptance. And so that's one of the biggest things I learned through my autism diagnosis, my healing journey. It wasn't just learning who I was. It was also learning who I wasn't. The more aware I became, the more I started noticing these masks, these roles, these expectations that I put on myself to be different. And for the first time, I started asking, what if I stopped trying so hard to fit in? What if I stopped trying, apologizing for who I am? If I stopped seeing my differences as flaws and realized confidence isn't believing you're perfect. Confidence is being comfortable being yourself. And that insight was incredibly freeing to me. Not because my flaws disappeared, and not because I stopped fighting with myself, but I stopped trying to become someone else. And I started accepting myself and becoming fully me. I finally, at age 49, stepping in to becoming myself. And the goal isn't perfection. The goal wasn't fitting in. My goal was being authentic to myself. And once I stopped hiding who I was finally ready to learn something even harder: how to choose myself. Once I stopped trying so hard to fit in, I ran into a new challenge. Knowing who I was didn't automatically mean I trusted myself. And maybe some of you can relate to that. Have you ever known what you should do but didn't do it? Have you ever ignored your intuition? Ignored that red flag, stayed too long in a relationship, said yes to someone when you wanted to say no? If that resonates with you, type a 1 in the chat. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that self-trust isn't built by thinking. It's built by listening to yourself. It's built by honoring what you already know. For years, I thought I needed more information, more books. Anyway, but I just asking more questions, needing more certainty, more reassurance, driving my friends absolutely crazy. And my colleagues. But what I really needed was courage. The courage to trust myself. The courage to set boundaries. The courage to disappoint people. the courage to make decisions that aligned with my values. Because every time we ignore ourselves, we weaken self-trust, is what I learned the hard way. And every time we honor ourselves, we strengthen it. That's why boundaries are so important. Boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're about honoring yourself. They're how we communicate with what aligns with our values and what doesn't. And honestly, some of the hardest boundaries aren't with other people. They are with ourselves. It's deciding I won't abandon myself to keep someone else comfortable. I won't ignore what I know what to be true. And I won't keep choosing fear over alignment. Because eventually I realize something. I don't need anyone to choose me. And the most important thing is I needed to choose me. And it's not from a point of selfishness, it's from a point of self-respect. And the more I did that, the more freedom I experienced. Not because life became easier, but because my decisions became clearer. I stopped building my life around fear, and I started building it around my values and making sure that my decisions aligned with my values through discernment. And that's what self-leadership looks like. It's not by being fearless, not being perfect, simply having the courage to honor what I know is true. And that's another lesson that I want to leave you here with today. So, as I was preparing for today, I kept coming back to one question. What if you were never broken in the first place? What if the things you've spent years judging about yourself make more sense than you realize? What if your fears make sense? What if your patterns make sense? And what if your struggles make sense? Not because they're ideal, not because they don't need attention, but instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You started looking at the reason for why you had those fears, those patterns, and asking yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I trying to protect? And what can I learn from this? Because that is what changed everything for me. When I stopped trying to fix myself and I embraced myself for who I was by trying to understand myself. When I embraced myself for the very first time, I stopped fighting with myself. And I finally became curious about myself. I stopped seeing flaws and I started seeing the adaptions. And I stopped organizing my life around fear and shame. And I started organizing it around awareness, courage, and values. And here's what I learned. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates freedom. And the freedom begins the moment we stop abandoning ourselves. That moment we stop hiding, the moment we stop waiting for that permission to be who we are, and we give it to ourselves. And then that moment when we decide to trust ourselves. And if it's there one, I know there's a lot that I've mentioned throughout this, but there's if I could have you take one thing away from today, it's that it's not your fault that you need healing. It's not your fault that you adapted. And you do not have to become someone else to be worthy. You just have to simply understand yourself more deeply. And then you will understand that just because you are here, you are deemed worthy. So if this resonated with you, type a 1 in the chat. And I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway. And if you'd like support on your journey, I offer free consultations. I have a free attachment guide. There's also, if you want to contact me, I can give you a link to my free school community called Rapid Reset Method. And there you can learn how to regulate yourself in real time. So thank you for spending this time with me today. And if you enjoyed this conversation, let me know. I'm going to plan to make this live conversation a weekly thing. So if you have content that you'd love for me to cover, please drop that in the chat or drop me a direct message. And I want to thank you all for joining me today and being human with me. Thank you.